ourselves. And so experience is a byproduct of having to develop certainty, and certainty is a Cancer archetype because it's familiarity. And familiarity is what develops our capacity to trust the terrain, which is then leading to our Aries archetype. So I'll get into this right now with us. So in the cardinal signs, so I'm going to break this down and then I'm going to kind of come back to what I've just shared with everybody today. So the cardinal sign of Aries, I speak about it as action. Now, I want to show you here, I had this green line here. And this green line, not to get too technical in terms of, astrology and aspects and phases, but that green line represents a tension between something between two archetypes that don't necessarily see each other. And so these green lines exist within all of the archetypes on some level. So the relationship between the sign of Scorpio and the sign of Aries is Scorpio wants everything to be completely merged with, and wants like deep intimacy. And Aries in itself says, no, I want freedom. So that green line represents the tension between holding on to what we feel safe with, but not necessarily knowing what exists beyond our limitations. And Aries wants to jump out of that place and go beyond that and explore that. And so in the philosophy of evolutionary astrology from Jeffrey Wolf Green's paradigm, the nature of the dual desire in our soul comes from this essential inconjunct, right? This green line. So the foundation for how we actually grow, in my opinion, and how I've internalized EA in terms of what it represents in terms of soul evolution, is there's always going to be a dynamic struggle between what we feel comfortable with in terms of our sense of certainty and what lies beyond the sense of comfortableness, and how we need to consistently challenge that line or boundary, Capricorn, of what we feel comfortable with and what we need to do and to grow essentially. So our sense of self grows when we keep pushing the boundary of what we know and what we don't know, right? Mutation, metamorphosis in this way. So Aries really pulls us into the space of, I need courage to jump out of the shell, to jump out of the known and into the unknown, right? It's a new beginning. It's an action of exploration. And it's uncharted territory. One of the things that I find so deeply fascinating about learning astrology and sharing astrology is that if we really connect to imagery, we can start to see the deeply encoded archetypes and the substructure of how they exist within our world, and how we relate to these archetypes, and how we speak about them and sense them and know them so intimately, and yet we never actually fully connect with it emotionally and have an experiential sense of what it's like. Because on some level, there's a kind of disconnect between the mental process of Aries being about, direction. But when you think of a ship on an ocean, for instance, wouldn't you on some level associate the context of a ship navigating the oceans with a sense of anxiety, knowing that, well, at any point in time, there could be a storm that could arrive, and the context of the storm could mean at some point that we might not survive because it could, affect us. Or in the times of sort of, classic going into, traveling the seas, well, you could come across another boat, for instance, that might want to actually not necessarily feel comfortable wanting to trade with you and wants to go to war with you and stuff like that. And so, traveling the uncharted territory of the ocean represents the process of an Aries function, because on some level, it means that if you're getting onto the boat as a person that's wanting to help this, then you're going to need courage. You're going to need a sense of separating from land, because land could represent, well, I can't drown on land unless I'm sort of in some sense a little bit inebriated and you fall into a barrel of water. But the point here is that certainty on ground and unfamiliarity and separation from the ground and going onto water and traveling through the water and discovering things anew are profound. And so Aries will always represent where we are being pushed to travel in uncharted territory. And of course, the onset of uncharted territory represents, well, I don't know what is there, so it's full of anxiety. So you'll learn that an EA talks about the anxiety of separation, and that's because it's unknown. For a moment, to really capture the essence of what I'm talking about here, you could actually connect with how your brain literally tries to map the territory in your environment, and notice how if you are in a new country, for instance, and the likelihood of you using the GPS, which is a manifestation of our sense of trying to map the terrain in a completely new technological way, because we used to do this with maps in the past, and of course we couldn't actually imagine the territory, and so therefore we were limited in our perception of what we could actually understand. And so with the onset of technology like GPS, for instance, it gives us the capacity to map the territory and have certainty while we go and discover that. And part of that in and of itself is the Uranus and Aries kind of new discovery where everybody can use GPS at this point in time. And so again, the point here is that we all are consistently with the development of the self mapping new territory. And the more that you can push the boundary between what is known and what is unknown and explore, the deeper your sense of certainty is going to grow. And that is a profound sense of how we can actually engage in like learning to be more in a sense, like certain and comfortable and confident in our ability to navigate the world, because ultimately we are essentially navigating the world with our senses. And I've written it down over here, Aries, as we develop and experience new things, our brain is taking in so much new stuff and we're processing. And part of that processing capacity is we're developing new neurological and neurons and brain synapses, and we're forming new experiences. And as we form new experiences, our capacity to relate to those new experiences are profound. And of course, that then leads us to how we're learning about the world. We're opening up to deeper layers of ourselves. So as the energy moves progressively from the archetype of Aries, when we get to the next cardinal sign of